we're going to talk to Nicole Armstrong, who is the CEO of TechBridge and such an inspiring leader and individual and just a really wonderful person to work with. So Nicole, I really want to get to know you better and hear more of your story, hear what your vision is for TechBridge and where we're going in the future. So let's start with your story. I know it's quite a story, so let's hit it. What do you have for us?
My love affair with technology started before technology was a buzzword. It started some 39 years ago when my dad gave me a computer. It was a TRS-80 from Radio Shack, so I'm really dating myself. And I had the opportunity to start coding. And at that moment, I really never understood how that gift and the opportunity to take a basic programming book would change my life. The high school that I applied to had this new program called computer programming. And so I ended up going to Murray Bertram High School for business careers. And it was the first time they offered computer science. And I would end up learning about the origins of computers and actually working in a computer room, which what the computers were the size of most people's living rooms. And I was putting punch cards into computers. While I was at Binghamton, Binghamton was the home of, I believe it's IBM and definitely GE Aerospace. And so I got the opportunity to work. My first job was with GE Aerospace, and I was coding in assembler, so really machine language. And I was a unit tester. And I had the opportunity to work on one of their top secret projects, which back then, I didn't even know the name of it, but it was the C-17, one of their first unmanned aircrafts that dropped equipment to the Army. And
that's amazing.
It was a phenomenal experience. And then, of course, the dot bomb happened. Mm-hmm. Which when the floor fell out for most companies, including Vignette. At that time, I think I was running a $40 million quarterly P&L. By the time 3 years later, that team of 150 was down to like 30. And we were in the middle of a huge deal with Sony Music Entertainment, because Sony was also trying to figure out how do they move from being a brick and mortar multi-billion-dollar enterprise to building their online presence. And they had to think about how to do that with artists. Ironically, Sony Music thought it was just a phase. They were like, digital music, what?
They all did. They thought it was a phase. It's just going to go away.
But they were losing so much money. And so they actually brought me on. They built a new division called the Digital Content Division. And and I use the word expert. They kind of reached out and said that they were looking for an expert. At the time, I was an expert in content management solutions and figuring out how to transform businesses digitally. And I was doing that at Vignette. So they ended up selecting Vignette, our software platform, and they made a phone call to the then Greg Peters, who was the CEO, and asked to see if they could steal me. So I remember the phone call through Nicole. I've got some good news, and then I've got some news that I'm not exactly sure how you're going to take this. And I'm like, okay. It's like, well, the good news is that we're going to get this Sony music deal, but they want you too. And so I kind of felt traded.
Yeah.
As in
Yeah.
a sports team trade.
Right. Right.
You know, from a business standpoint, we were really struggling. And so anyway, I ended up taking the opportunity, leading that huge global initiative for Sony Music. And, it was a wonderful opportunity. They paid me a lot of money to do it. So, and I was young. The project, I decided that I was at a point where I could take a respite. And I took some time off and really was kind of in this inflection point on what I really wanted to do next. And a little company called SCHOOLNET called me. And SCHOOLNET was a K-12 education technology company. And this is back in the early 2000s, where again, ed tech wasn't even, we didn't even connect education and technology together.
Right. Right.
And when I was growing up, the part that I didn't mention was that I thought that I would be a teacher. So you can imagine this phone call from this little company called SCHOOLNET that said, hey, we're looking for a general manager that has tech that can help this technology company put tools in the hands of teachers.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It
Perfect fit.
Amazing. It was amazing. Yeah. And so I got the opportunity to join SCHOOLNET in its infancy. It was another startup. So we went through all of the startup pains. I eventually would become the Senior Vice President of Client Services, and SCHOOLNET would eventually get acquired by Pearson, which was then the largest education company in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow.
They would go on to create Pearson K-12. Jonathan Harbour, who is still one of my dearest mentors, would become the CEO of that division, and I would stay on for a while as Senior Vice President of Major Accounts. And again, it just broadened our impact. It just allowed us to help more schools, and really, conversations about equity and access, that we were right at the front line. And then the federal government kind of started looking at the performance of schools and Race to the Top, and grants like that became prevalent, and then the whole concept of education technology exploded. So I ended up John was on the board of a company called Renaissance Learning, and they were, I would like to describe them as a 30-year-old startup. They
nice.
had a lot of challenges that they were trying to solve. The biggest is that they were seeing a lot of attrition in their customer base. And so they wanted to build this new division in their organization called customer success. So I would accept that role. And then I think 4 days after I started, the company got sold. And the entire leadership team, including the CEO who hired me, was gone.
Wow. That's a good that's a good Friday for you. 4 days, start on Monday or Friday, you're looking around going, what is happening right now?
Ended up staying 18 months and really building out the infrastructure and delivering on all of the promises so that they could actually continue moving forward. And and while I was kind of dialing that down, the universe put TechBridge in front of me.
Wow. So that gave you a pretty robust experience base to launch out of. And if I'm remembering everything you've talked about correctly, this is your first time leading a nonprofit, right?
It is.
Okay. I love that, actually. That's kind of exciting, because I think you bring a different perspective to the nonprofit space than you otherwise might. So.